Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would review this little video by this one channel called Fannon International Boxing. Fannon is one of those channels that I usually tend to agree with a little bit more than what I tend to disagree. But I would say that I agree with about 60% overall of what he has to say. So, that would mean, all in all, that, there's a decent amount that I agree with him, but there's a certain amount that, maybe I don't, may not agree with that analysis. But it is what it is. But anyways, when it comes down to it in this video, Fanan is going to be talking about, of course, the rumor that the Canelo Alvarez versus Jermall Charlo fight will happen next. And of course, just like everyone else, he is very interested in that fight, and I am personally very interested in that fight. But in this video, we're going to be talking about the actual chance that I believe that Jermall Charlo has to beat a Saul Canelo Alvarez. Because there's been a multiple amount of, I believe, professionals or professional boxing analysts or former fighters like a Paulie Malignaggi or Floyd Mayweather Jr. that actually say that they believe that Jermall Charlo may actually beat Saul Canelo Alvarez. And I'm going to be analyzing things in this video. I'm going to be telling you, in my opinion, and I've already kind of stated this a multitude of times, how much of a chance I think Jermall Charlo has against Canelo Alvarez. That's if Canelo Alvarez takes him 100% seriously, which I think that he will. Because Canelo always takes his fights very, very seriously. But you never know. What I will say is this: Jermall Charlo does need to be taken seriously in this fight. Because if Canelo Alvarez thinks that Jermall Charlo is just going to be a cakewalk, he could potentially lose this fight. And hopefully, overall, Canelo does not pull another Teofimo Lopez versus George Kambosos when it comes down to it, because I believe that Canelo, of course, is on a very, very high level in terms of skill set and in terms of the quality of fighter that he is. But we'll see what happens. Jermall Charlo, of course, is a very decently talented fighter, but I'm going to be talking about, in my opinion, what makes Jermall Charlo, and what positives and what negatives he has in this Saul Canelo Alvarez fight, and what he has in his style, and what percentage of a chance I'm giving Jermall Charlo to possibly beat Canelo. But let's get into the video.
All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fannon, and in this video, we're going to talk about Jermall Charlo, Canelo Alvarez, and what Paulie Malignaggi plus another expert has to say about the fight, which might shock you. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fannon. In this video, we're going to talk about the middleweight division, or excuse me, the 168 pound or the super middleweight division, with a fight that very well could be taking place between Saul Canelo Alvarez, the undisputed champion at 168, and the WBC 160 pound champion Jermall Charlo. But before I get into that, let me first welcome you guys to the channel and also ask you to support our sponsor for this video, BUSR, and you can sign up at BUSR/Fanon, BUSR.ag/Fanon. If you deposit or and bet $10, you will have a chance to win an additional $500 to put on other sports that you want to bet on. Make sure you guys go take advantage of that promotion and other promotions that we have. Also, hit the like button, share, subscribe, all that good stuff for the channel. Okay, let's get into this. Some of y'all ain't going to like this. I'm not sure 100% if I agree with it. In fact, I think that it is kind of tough. Jermall Charlo is going to be, or Canelo Alvarez, it is rumored, is in talks to make a fight with Jermall Charlo. This has been a fight that I have wanted to see for several years, since the two of them were at 154 pounds together. After that, at a 160 pounds, Jermall Charlo was the mandatory for Canelo Alvarez at that weight division. And now that Canelo is at 168 pounds, it looks like we might actually get that fight. Now, Paulie Malignaggi, I'm going to talk about what Paulie Malignaggi said, and then also what another trainer, former professional fighter trainer, when he gave me their insight on the fight, what they said. And it is, the combination of it is, look, Jermall Charlo absolutely has a chance to beat Canelo Alvarez in this fight. And one of my guys said, look, man, do not be surprised if Canelo Alvarez gets hit with something he can't deal with and might get stopped against Jermall Charlo. Now that...
Listen, let me say this when it comes down to it. If Canelo Alvarez were to get stopped against Jermall Charlo, I think the only way that that were to happen is if Canelo Alvarez were to have literally one of the worst performances in his career. As if, like, pretty much a performance like Teofimo Lopez had against George Kambosos. Canelo would have to perform that badly, in my opinion, because I've seen Canelo in there with A-grade punches before. I've seen him in there against Callum Smith. I've seen him in there against Danny Jacobs. I've seen him in there against Gennady Triple G Golovkin, and he was able to withstand the power against each and every single one of those fighters. There's a reason why I predicted Canelo Alvarez to win the Gennady Golovkin rematch, and the reason why I predicted him to win the Gennady Golovkin rematch is because Canelo Alvarez, once he figured out in that first fight that Gennady Golovkin could not knock him out with just one shot, or more than likely not just one good shot, and that he could somewhat take that power, Canelo Alvarez was going to be able to go on the inside with Gennady Golovkin, and Gennady, he is a multi-dimensional fighter. He can fight a little bit on the back foot, and he fights very, very well on the front foot. But compared to Canelo, it was going to be a very difficult situation. Because Gennady, even though he has very good footwork, he doesn't have the fastest of feet, at least compared to that of a Canelo Alvarez, and he certainly does not have the hand speed over him. And I think that this fight, it could end up somewhat similar. You know what this fight actually reminds me of when it comes to Jermall Charlo versus Canelo, the matchup? It reminds me of another Floyd Mayweather Jr. versus Canelo Alvarez, or an Alexander Usyk versus Anthony Joshua, where one fighter is basically going to be trying to outbox or outslick the other, but that's not really the main objective that you should be trying to do because you're not going to be as skilled as this guy. It just is what it is. And that's why Canelo Alvarez, now Canelo is very, very highly skilled, and I think that he's a better fighter today than what he was against Floyd Mayweather Jr. But Canelo Alvarez, he's never overall going to be able to just completely outbox a Floyd Mayweather Jr. overall, in terms of especially that slickness, because Floyd overall is smaller in stature. He's a person that has faster feet, faster hands. They both have very, very great, counter-punching ability and great boxing IQ. But when you have a guy all in all that is smaller, quicker, and a person all in all that has faster feet, it's going to be harder to beat them. It just is what it is. That's why Alexander Usyk was able to completely embarrass Anthony Joshua, because Anthony Joshua, he did the wrong thing. He tried to outbox Alexander Usyk. And this fight, in my opinion, when it comes to Jermall Charlo, in my opinion, he's probably going to try to outslick, Canelo, or try to outbox him. He's probably going to try to stick his jab out there and outjab Canelo and try to outbox him. And that, in my opinion, is not the way to go. Don't get me wrong. I think that it's good to do that here and there because Canelo has shown in the past that maybe he has problems with slick styles. But I do think that he has improved against them. That's the reason why I think that he looked so decent against Caleb Plant and Billy Joe Saunders. The problem is with Jermall Charlo is that I don't think that he knows his limitations. Now, some people, some of you may be saying, what the hell are you talking about? Jermall Charlo, he is a decently slick fighter. He looked good against some of those other fighters. He was able to get past Julian J.R. Williams. He was able to get past Sergey Derevyanchenko. Yes, he was able to get past those boxers that are on a decently lower level than what a Canelo Alvarez is. But when I just take a look at the skill sets comparatively, and when I'm really, checking off the whole entire skill set, there's not one category that Jermall Charlo beats Canelo Alvarez in, unless we're just talking about height or reach. He doesn't beat him in foot speed. He doesn't beat him in hand speed. I don't even know if he beats him in punching power. He doesn't beat him in head movement. He doesn't beat him in defensive responsibility. He doesn't beat him in terms of the jab. He doesn't beat him in slickness. He doesn't beat him in anything. Jermall Charlo, when it comes down to it, like I said, I think that he's a very, very decent boxer. And because of the power that he has, he could very well keep Canelo Alvarez honest. So this could be a 7 rounds to 5, 8 rounds to 4 fight, kind of like the Danny Jacobs fight was. But when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, I don't think that Canelo Alvarez, I don't think that he's just going to go in there and overall get knocked out with just one shot. But what I will say is this, once again, he does need to take Jermall Charlo seriously. Because, of course, when someone is on top and they may underestimate an opponent, they may get potentially beat. So Canelo, of course, needs to take Jermall Charlo seriously. He is a very serious opponent. He is at least a decent boxer. But like I said, Jermall Charlo, what he reminds me of, he's like a bigger version of Danny Garcia. Maybe a little bit more articulated than what a prime Danny Garcia is, but they're around that same level, in my opinion. So where both of them, they're very high-level boxers, but when I take a look at them, they don't have fastest feet, they don't have necessarily A-grade head movement. You can get them to lose confidence the more pressure you put on them and the more that you land against them. And even though they have decent speed and decent power, they don't have A-grade speed when it comes down to it. So if he meets a person that's a very, very decent athlete, as well as a decently skilled boxer, as well as a person who can take a punch, unlike a J-Rock Williams. In my opinion, I think Canelo is a very, very bad matchup for Jermall Charlo. But we'll see what happens. The things that Canelo will have to watch out for in that fight, first of all, is the jab, because Jermall Charlo at his best does have a very, very decent jab. And Canelo, he's never really been known to avoid the jab extremely well when it comes down to it, although I think he has gotten better at it. And another thing I'll have to watch out for is that very, very lethal uppercut that Jermall Charlo has on the inside, that good right uppercut. Because Julian Jarrett Williams, if you actually watch the highlights of that, Julian Jarrett Williams was landing a lot of good, flush, powerful punches on Jermall Charlo. I believe that he actually was even able to hurt him here and there a little bit, not to the point to where he looked super duper rocked, but you could tell that the punches were bothering him. But Julian Jarrett Williams, his mistake is not only does he have a paper mache chin, but when it comes down to it all in all, Julian Jarrett Williams would just stay inside the zone too long, and that's eventually what led to that uppercut counter. So Canelo, he does need to watch out here, because Jermall Charlo is a decent counter puncher, and if Canelo gets hit too often, who knows, he could possibly get hurt with something, or it could at least lose him points on the scorecards. So Canelo, what he's going to have to do in this fight, just like what Mayweather did with him, just like what Alexander Usyk did with Anthony Joshua, use your feet. You have faster feet than Jermall Charlo. You're going to have to get in and outside of the range very, very quickly. Otherwise, you could get countered on the inside. So we'll see what happens.
To the Canelo Alvarez fans is absolute, what do you call it, a sacrilege. It's impossible, cannot happen. But this is boxing, and people get knocked out in boxing. And, there's a saying that goes around,
I don't think that Jermall Charlo beating Canelo is impossible. I just think that it's improbable when it comes down to that's what I believe it personally is. Because Charlo, when I just take a look at him, I just think that he's too limited. When I take a look at his fights, even if you take a look at his best performances, there's just never been a performance in Jermall Charlo's career where I've taken a look at it and I said, wow, that was a performance of a lifetime. There's never been a performance like that in Jermall Charlo's career. Never. Even against Sergey Derevyanchenko and Julian Jarrett Williams, he's always looked somewhat vulnerable. He does not have a great head movement. He can be a sucker for a jab and a right hand, a good 1-2. You can take a look at that against Sergey Derevyanchenko and Julian Jarrett Williams. He does not have the fastest of feet. And this is why I don't believe that Jermall Charlo is the right style to beat Canelo, because Jermall Charlo is a person that, in my opinion, like I said, he doesn't know his limitations. That's not me saying that you're not supposed to have belief in yourself, that you're not supposed to have confidence. But if Jermall Charlo thinks that he's just going to be in there and outslick Canelo Alvarez, he has a completely different thing coming. Because Jermall Charlo is not his former sparring partner, Erislandy Lara. He is not him. Erislandy Lara in his prime is more skilled than that of a Jermall Charlo. Erislandy Lara overall had better head movement, better defensive responsibility, much quicker feet than him. When it came down to it, faster hands, better counterpunching ability, better timing, better defensive responsibility, better boxing IQ. Erislandy Lara in his prime is one of the most skilled fighters, especially defensively, that I've personally ever seen. I don't think a lot of people really realize how great Erislandy Lara at one point in time really was. I mean, he was able to completely embarrass Austin Trout. He actually, in certain rounds, was able to also embarrass that of a Saul Canelo Alvarez. That's why Saul Canelo Alvarez had so many problems against Lara. Lara really is a defensive wizard. He's a boxing wizard. It's just unfortunate that his career did not turn out like it probably should have. But when it comes down to it, I don't think Jermall Charlo is an Erislandy Lara. And even if we're comparing him to Billy Joe Saunders and Caleb Plant, the reason why I gave them, about the same chances as Charlo. Now, Charlo, I give him about the same chance, was about a 30% chance at most over Saul Canelo Alvarez, meaning what? That, I have Canelo Alvarez as a clear favorite, but if Charlo were able to pull off the upset, it's not like I would see it as Buster Douglas versus Mike Tyson. But at the end of the day, the thing is this, unless Canelo puts on a stinker of a performance and puts on a very, very low quality performance, I don't see how Jermall Charlo beats Canelo. I don't think that he can knock him out. And that's another thing about Canelo as well. Canelo has an A-grade chin. Canelo might have debatably the greatest chin in boxing that I've personally ever seen. I mean, I've only seen him truly, truly hurt, almost wobbled, and almost knocked out in his career at one point in time. And that was against Miguel Cotto's older brother, I believe, Jose Cotto. But that was when he was very, very decently young, I believe. But every other fight that I've seen Canelo win, I mean, his chin is A-grade. He might have personally the best chin that I've seen, especially in modern boxing. It's either between him and Gennady Golovkin, or Gennady Golovkin, but, it is what it is.
Used to be on, I don't know if you guys ever watched Welcome Back, Carter, but it was a saying that they used, that this guy named Horshack said, when you least expect it, expect it. And in boxing, I think that really does come into play when people...
That is true. A lot of the times when people all know that they feel they're on top of the world, or they underestimate their opponent, like what Teofimo did to George Kambosos, in my opinion, or what Anthony Joshua did to Andrew Ruiz, or Mike Tyson versus Buster Douglas. Guess what? Upsets can happen. So Canelo does need to be watching. He does need to watch out in this fight. because Jermall Charlo is just as big of a threat as Billy Joe Saunders or Caleb Plant or any one of those guys. Some would maybe even debate a bigger threat because, of course, he has the power to possibly keep Canelo Alvarez honest. You know, he certainly has more power than Billy Joe Saunders and Caleb Plant. But the thing, in my opinion, that Caleb Plant and Billy Joe Saunders had that was different than that of a Jermall Charlo that made the fight overall possibly more difficult, you know, they didn't necessarily have the power that a Jermall Charlo has, but they had the excellence overall, or at least overall, they had faster feet and faster hands. And the way that Canelo Alvarez looked so defensively responsible in those two fights, if the same Canelo Alvarez shows up against Jermall Charlo, I don't see Jermall Charlo winning any more than 4 rounds.
People get this.
That's guessing that he doesn't get knocked out, but we'll see what happens.
Aura of invisibility, and people think they get to the point of treating fighters like nobody can ever beat them. They're, you know, no one is close to them. They're just on a completely different level than anybody else. A guy that is hungry, that has been looking to fight that person for a long time, and has true belief in themselves. Things happen, man, and people wind up getting knocked out. Like, for example, with Antonio Tarver and Roy Jones Jr. Roy Jones Jr. wins the heavyweight championship of the world against John Ruiz.
I think that Canelo Alvarez is a little bit different from that of a Roy Jones Jr. Now, that's not me trying to necessarily put Canelo Alvarez on the Roy Jones Jr. as of yet, because Roy Jones Jr., in my opinion, is one of the top 10 greatest boxers of all time because of how dominant he was. But what I will say about Canelo Alvarez versus Roy Jones Jr. is this. Canelo, in my opinion, not only had a greater chin than what Roy Jones Jr. had, but he's probably more defensively responsible. Canelo, a lot of the times, what I notice with him is that he loves to keep his hands up. He usually overall is very defensively responsible. You know, he's probably the most defensively responsible fighter that is active in boxing today. You know, he very, very rarely gets hit with a flush shot. What I will say about Canelo Alvarez is this, though, because sometimes what I notice about the highlights is this. Sometimes when he feels that he's in the groove of a fight, you know, he may, you know, keep his hands down a little bit more and he may get hit with a good shot. But when he gets hit with that good shot, then his hands are back up and basically he's defensively responsible for the rest of the fight. So it's not a super huge problem. But Canelo, all in all, once again, he needs to be defensively responsible 100% of the time in the Jermall Charlo fight. Because Jermall Charlo, of course, packs a wallop of a punch. He can hit.
Back down to 175 pounds and gets knocked out by Antonio Tarver, right? Because Antonio Tarver, although...
But Roy Jones Jr. was never a person, in my opinion, that was A-grade defensively responsible. His defense was his reflexes, and all in all, his athleticism and his ability to maneuver out of the way. So when he finally did face a fighter, all in all, or when he finally, you know, basically when those reflexes started to go out the window, he didn't just get knocked out. He got knocked out very badly.
He was not...
Where Canelo, you know, sure, he may rely a little bit on his athleticism, but he mainly, you know, relies on that defensive responsibility, his movement.
Big, or he wasn't as big as John Ruiz. He was not as, you know, did not have a major championship belt like John Ruiz. He was a faster fighter than John Ruiz, and he had things that he's a southpaw, and he was very, very familiar with how Roy Jones Jr. fought. So Paulie Malignaggi, who was on The Boxing Voice, when he was asked about the fight, said, "Look, man, I'm going to pick Jermall Charlo for this fight." And the reason that he gave was, first, he said he's going to stick with his guns because that's what he said before. But he said, look, man, if you look at how Jermall Charlo fights and how Gennady Golovkin fights, Gennady Golovkin, a lot of people think Gennady Golovkin beat Canelo Alvarez in both of those fights. And if you look at the way that Jermall...
Well, the first fight, I thought that Gennady Golovkin should have won because I don't think Canelo did enough. I thought that, you know, he was too much. And I don't mind fighters that are on the back foot. I don't have a problem with that. But I thought that Canelo was a little bit too much on the back foot. I don't think that he had enough action. The second fight, though, Canelo Alvarez clearly won. And, you know, it was a very tough fight. I thought it was 7 rounds to 5, probably around there. But Canelo, he was able to beat him. And the reason why he was able to beat him is because and there was a reason why I predicted Canelo Alvarez more than likely to beat Gennady Golovkin in the rematch. Because I figured out, and, you know, this is pretty much what Canelo figured as well. Once he knew that Gennady Golovkin was not going to be able to knock him out with just one shot like he did pretty much everyone else, he was going to be able to push Gennady Golovkin back, and that was going to limit Gennady Golovkin to a certain degree. He's not necessarily a Deontay Wilder to where he can't fight off the back foot whatsoever, but Gennady Golovkin, when it comes down to it, he was going to be limited on the back foot compared to Canelo because, you know, when it comes down to it, that pretty much is like a Terrence Bud Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr. situation. If you know, both Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. had A plus chins. You know, that's pretty much what that situation is because Canelo, he has quicker feet than Gennady Golovkin. He can get in and outside of the range quicker, which means that he's going to get hit with less shots, and he can get off his shots quicker when it comes down to it and counter better than Gennady Golovkin. Gennady still gave him hell because of how decorated of a fighter he was and how great of a fighter he was, but Gennady Golovkin, he knew from the get-go in the second half of that fight, or the second fight from the first bell, he said, wow, this guy is starting to come at me. And if I don't get in there, if I don't get some punches off, I'm going to lose this fight because all in all, I can't necessarily fight this guy backing up. He's quicker than me. He has quicker hands than me. He has quicker feet than me. I can't get in and out of the zone as quick as him. So what I'm going to have to do, that there is a reason why Gennady backed up a little bit more in that fight. He couldn't just charge at Canelo the whole entire time 100% because that would basically be him getting hit with shots and, Canelo all in all just moving inside and out of the zone. But he couldn't back up the whole entire time either because Gennady Golovkin, even though he can fight a little bit on the back foot, he's mainly a pressure fighter.
Charlo fights and the way that Gennady Golovkin fights, they're very similar, with the exception of
somewhat. Jermall Charlo, what he is, he's like a weaker version of Gennady Golovkin if you want to compare the two. Like I said, what Jermall Charlo he reminds me of a bigger version of Danny Garcia. That's what he reminds me of. Someone that, very good punching power, decent counter punching ability, a little bit of slickness, but he doesn't remind me of a Floyd Mayweather Jr. He's not the Terrence Crawford of the 160-pound division. What Jermall Charlo is, like I said, he's the Danny Garcia. Very good punching power, not the fastest of feet, even though he has decent footwork when it comes down to it. He does have decent hand speed, but it's not A-grade compared to some of his other contemporaries. That's why I don't think that Jermall Charlo is going to beat Canelo if Canelo, like I said, unless Canelo whelms in the performance and does not take him seriously, I don't see how Canelo Alvarez loses to Jermall Charlo. Because Canelo has an A-grade chin, I don't think that he can get knocked out with just one shot. More than likely. On top of that, he has better head movement, better feet when it comes down to it, at least, quicker feet. On top of that, I just think that he's more accurate with his punches. He's more defensively responsible. I do not see how Jermall Charlo beats Canelo Alvarez. It was very similar in the Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder fight. So many people take a look at it and they say, well, Deontay Wilder, he's so talented athletically. And Jermall Charlo is as well. But Deontay Wilder, he didn't beat Tyson Fury in any category. He did not beat him in any category in terms of skill set. He didn't beat him overall, in footwork. He didn't beat him in foot speed. He didn't beat him in defensive responsibility. He didn't beat him in head movement. He didn't beat him in jab. He didn't beat him in any of those categories. Canelo is going to have to watch out with Jermall Charlo once again with his jab and, with some of the counters that he has on the inside. So what Canelo is going to have to do, he can't get lax on the inside. He's going to have to move in and out here and there, pop his jab off, especially shoot that right hand to the head, sometimes to the body as well. Also hit Jermall Charlo with a good left hook because both Charlo brothers are very vulnerable to a left hook, both to the body and to the head.
Jermall Charlo is more.
In terms of Jermall Charlo, what do I believe that he's going to have to do? I don't think that working off your jab is necessarily a bad plan, but if you think that you're just going to outslick Canelo Alvarez like Erislandy Lara, you're fighting the wrong fight because you're not Erislandy Lara. Like I said, a person has got, a man's got to know their limitations when it comes down to it. And Jermall Charlo, like I said, it's the same thing with Anthony Joshua and Alexander Usyk. Anthony Joshua cannot outbox Alexander Usyk. If he's going to outbox him or beat him, he's going to have to go in there and make him uncomfortable. Jermall Charlo is going to have to do the same thing. If he's going to win this fight, he has to push Canelo Alvarez on the back foot. He has to try to make him uncomfortable. And even that is going to be hard because Canelo can fight in a multitude of ways. He can fight you coming forward. He can fight on the back foot. So this is why I say I don't think Jermall Charlo is going to beat Canelo. I don't think he has the style. I don't think he has the boxing IQ. I don't think he has the boxing ability. And I think that he has the complete wrong style to beat Canelo Alvarez.
Elusive defensively than Gennady Golovkin is. But that same straight right hand.
Because like I said, this fight kind of reminds me of Marvin Hagler versus Sugar Ray Leonard or a Floyd versus Canelo Alvarez. Or an Alexander Usyk versus Anthony Joshua. Two very, very high-level fighters. But the fighter that's bigger and doesn't have the hand speed and doesn't have the foot speed is the one basically trying to outbox the other boxer that's also on a high level in terms of boxing IQ and boxing skills. It ain't going to work. If Jermall Charlo was going to beat Canelo, it's a good thing to work off the jab. But another thing also with Jermall Charlo is the more that you land on him, the more he loses confidence. That's another comparison why I compare him to Danny Garcia. Danny Garcia is very, very similar. The more that you land on him, the more power punches especially, the less he'll throw.
Very stern jab, straight right hand, left hooks, and the ability to knock people out if he catches them cleanly. Both guys have that same, have that same ability. And if Canelo Alvarez stands right in front of Jermall Charlo, he very well may have the same difficulties with Gennady Golovkin that he had.
Right, but Canelo Alvarez is not going to stand in front of anybody. Canelo is not a person that is like a David Benavidez and is just going to stand right in front of you. And David Benavidez, even at his best, when I seen him in that rematch against that one Romanian fighter, David Benavidez has a little bit of slickness, but now that I've seen him within his past few fights, and the majority of the time, David Benavidez, he just doesn't have the head movement or really the major slick ability. Canelo Alvarez, the thing is about him is that he's not just a person that stays inside the zone. He moves. He moves constantly. He moves with his feet. He moves with his head. So Canelo Alvarez, like I said, he ain't just going to stand in front of you. Take a look at the Danny Jacobs fight, for example. That's how that fight is probably going to go. It's probably either going to be 8 rounds to 4 or 7 rounds to 5. Maybe not 7 rounds to 5. And, like I said, Canelo, he's even better today than what he was those couple years ago against Danny Jacobs. He's more adjusted to the power. And all in all, he's gotten better with each and every fight. So Jermall Charlo, like I said, I believe that he will get outboxed. Because Canelo's not a person that'll just stand in front of you. He's a person that really loves to move in and out of the zone. He moves very, very well.
That he had with they had the same problems with Jermall Charlo that he had as with Gennady Golovkin, right? Now, the other guy that I talked about said, look, yeah, man, absolutely, Jermall Charlo can win that fight, and broke it down somewhat like this. Like, look, man, Jermall Charlo is a very strong fighter. He is a very technically sound fighter that does not make a lot of mistakes. Now, he's not had,
That's not true at all. Jermall Charlo does make a lot of mistakes. The mistakes that he has, and if he is going to make a mistake against Canelo, it's going to be that he's going to try to outbox him. I do not think Jermall Charlo can outbox Canelo. Now, you can pressure him, and I think all in all that, trying to outbox him here and there, you can try to do that. You're also going to have to pressure him a little bit. You got to try to go at Canelo Alvarez in this fight, in my opinion, if you're Jermall Charlo. Because you don't have the Demetrius Andrade ability. You don't have the Araceli Lara ability. It just is what it is. Because those guys have quicker feet than Jermall Charlo have ever had.
There's fights where people have fought him where he didn't blow them out.
But like I said, even if you take a look at Jermall Charlo in his best fights, the 2 biggest ones of his career, Sergey Derevyanchenko and Julian Jarrett Williams, take a look at both of those fights. He's a sucker for a left jab when it comes down to it. He's a sucker for a straight right cross right down the pipe when it comes down to it. He doesn't have A-grade head movement. He doesn't have A-grade defense. He's a very decent fighter, A-grade fighter, but he's on that A- level.
But he is a boxer. He is not going to lay everything out on the line out there to get a knockout on a guy. He's going to win rounds, and if the knockout comes, the knockout comes, right? And sometimes you don't get knockouts. But he said, look, at 160 pounds, not 100% sure that Jermall Charlo's at his full strength at 160 pounds. He might actually be a heavier puncher at 168 pounds because the guy is so big and coming down in weight.
It's possible that maybe he would have a power improvement. I'm not sure how much the power is going to improve, but we'll see what happens. In my opinion, if people are asking me, well, do you think that Jermall Charlo will provide Canelo with similar problems compared to a Gennady Golovkin? No, I think that he'll provide similar problems to Canelo, maybe that a Danny Jacobs was able to offer, because he has very good power, but Jermall Charlo is not as articulate. He's not as good of a counter puncher or as decorated as a boxer what Gennady Golovkin was. Gennady, once again, he's a little bit limited on the back foot, but he's a person all in all that can box very well. Like Gennady Golovkin, just comparing him to Jermall Charlo, he had better footwork in my opinion. He also had a decently better jab. He was a person that overall was a naturally better counterpuncher. It just is what it is.
So far that he made,
and on top of that, had more power.
Benefit from the weight increase, just like Canelo Alvarez benefited from weight increases. Canelo Alvarez got stronger. The higher up in weight, the more power that he had, and the fact that he's fighting bigger, slower guys.
Well, we really don't overall know. Well, I don't know if he said Canelo or Jermall Charlo there. There's certain fighters that the more that they move up the weight divisions, the more power they have, but a lot of the times that usually does not happen. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen with everyone, but usually fighters that when they move up in weight divisions, their power tends to, I won't necessarily say increase, but they still have decent punching power at that weight division. It's because that they're probably not too far out from that weight division anyway. Like Terrence Bud Crawford. A lot of people say, wow, Terrence Bud Crawford's weight is really carried up. Yeah, because his natural weight is actually pretty much of a natural welterweight. Like, he has that stature. Everyone thinks that Terrence Crawford is this shrimp in the welterweight division, but he's not. He rehydrates pretty much as the same as what Errol Spence Jr. does. He's 160. Canelo Alvarez rehydrates at about 185 to 190. So I don't think that he's really gotten more powerful as he's gone up in the weight divisions. I just think that it's still there. But,
he's able to get his punches off more quickly.
And that's why I don't believe that Jermall Charlo's power is going to increase, because he's pretty much the same stature as Canelo Alvarez.
And this guy's like, look, at this point in time, Jermall Charlo still has a size advantage over Canelo Alvarez, but he also probably has faster hands than Canelo Alvarez, and he's very, very familiar.
No, he doesn't have faster hands. At least I've never seen Jermall Charlo have faster hands. Canelo has decently faster hands than Jermall Charlo. And I think that's going to be another problem for him. But we'll see what happens.
With what Canelo Alvarez...
Like I said, I've never taken a look at Jermall Charlo in a fight. Go ahead and take a look at him in his biggest fights. Take a look at him versus Derevyanchenko and overall versus, Julian J. Rock Williams. I've never looked at Jermall Charlo and said, wow, his fans are the quickest that I've ever seen. It just is what it is. I don't even know if he's quite as fast as, like I said, that's why Caleb Plant and Billy Joe Saunders, in my opinion, were decent matchups for Canelo, because, yeah, they don't have the power that Jermall Charlo has, but they have quicker feet and they have quicker hands. That's why the big question was, how will Canelo be able to deal with them? Sure, they don't have the power necessarily to keep Canelo as honest as maybe some of the other fighters out there, but they have very fast feet. They overall have very fast hands. That's why Caleb Plant and Billy Joe Saunders, in my opinion, they were so interesting in matchups, and Canelo was able to handle them pretty decently well. Now, the big question is that Jermall Charlo, yeah, sure, he may not be as quick as them, but with his power, will the fight be more competitive than those fights? Because maybe it'll look more like Danny Jacobs or Gennady Golovkin, because maybe Canelo won't be able to walk them down the same. Maybe, but we'll see what happens.
His weaknesses are, because he has been looking and training to fight Canelo Alvarez for a very long time, man. And he's like, look, man, do not get at lunch. Also, the fact that Canelo Alvarez has not been fighting the best competition in the world, Jermall Charlo is a step up in power and in skill from what...
Actually, Canelo Alvarez has been facing very good competition. Listen, I understand a lot of people's points when they believe that Jermall Charlo is above Caleb Plant and Billy Joe Saunders. Listen, this is my personal opinion. Those guys are pretty much all on that same level. Now, Jermall Charlo, he's a level above in terms of power, obviously. He's a person that has decently more power than those guys. But in terms of boxing skills, he doesn't have the foot speed. He doesn't have the hand speed of any of those fighters.
Canelo Alvarez has been seeing lately. And if you look at what happened with Gennady Golovkin, with Canelo Alvarez and Caleb Plant, dude, Caleb Plant showed a lot of things in the fight with Canelo Alvarez and let you know that Canelo Alvarez is probably more hittable now than he had been previously.
I disagree with that. I actually think that Canelo Alvarez is less hittable today than what he was several years ago. Even just a few years ago. Once again, you can tell every fight that Canelo Alvarez, is in, he just gets better and better. Now, Caleb Plant was able to hit him a little bit more, all in all, in that Canelo Alvarez fight than probably what a Billy Joe Saunders was. But at the end of the day, Canelo still was clearly winning the fight. He adjusted extremely well. And like I said, Charlo, I don't think that he can do all the things that Caleb Plant can do against Canelo. The reason why is because, all in all, and it may be more competitive than the Caleb Plant fight, it may not be. But at the end of the day, like I said, it's probably going to end up being about an 8 rounds to 4 fight. If even that. Because Canelo, like I said, he just has the advantage over Charlo in almost every category. At least Caleb Plant, maybe you could say that he has quick feet, maybe over Canelo, and, he has very, very good hand speed. He's faster than what Jermall Charlo is. Once again, no, he doesn't have the power, but when it comes down to it, Caleb Plant is a very, very decently talented fighter, and he's just quicker than what Jermall Charlo is. That's why I was so decently impressed with what Canelo was able to do in those last 2 fights, because both of those fighters were very decently quick.
One of the really great things about Canelo Alvarez, and one of his skills really is being able to stand right in front of you and slip a lot of shots. But when he was right there and standing in front of Caleb Plant, he really wasn't able to slip the shots as well as he was before.
He was able to slip a certain amount of shots, but like I said, this fight to me is going to end up a lot probably like the Danny Jacobs versus, Canelo Alvarez fight. It's just I think Canelo will even be better today than what he was against Danny Jacobs.
Not sure if that has anything to do with the fact that the man...
But like I said, Caleb Plant, they call him sweet hands for a reason. He has very fast hands. Charlo, I'm not saying that he's slow, but like I said, if I'm going to compare him, like I said, he's like the Danny Garcia of, those weight classes. He is fast. You got to watch out for him, but he's not someone that has A+ hand speed.
Had his knees were damaged, or just the general putting on all of that muscle mass may have slowed him down a little bit and made it a little bit more difficult for him to get out of the way of the shots. But if he's getting consistently hit by Jermall Charlo, don't believe that Jermall Charlo does not have the power to absolutely hurt Canelo Alvarez. And
Yes, but I don't think Jermall Charlo has the ability to consistently hit Canelo. Like I said, Caleb Plant, in my opinion, the punches that Jermall Charlo are going to be throwing at Canelo Alvarez, besides maybe the jab, they're probably going to be easier to avoid, at least debatably, than what a Caleb Plant was. Reason why, once again, because he doesn't have the hand speed that they do.
and potentially get him out of there. It's a much more even fight than people think.
Like I said, go and take a look at Jermall Charlo all in all versus Julian Jargoins and Sergey Derevyanchenko. Now, he does have very decent accuracy. He's not the worst accurate puncher in the world. But like I said, his hand speed, it's not A grade.
I think it is.
At least it's not on the A plus level. Canelo's hand speed is at least on the A grade level.
And, that's kind of was the take on it. My personal take on it is, I would lean towards Canelo Alvarez because of the experience and because of the judges. I don't think it's going to be a knockout either way.
And, of course, basically what that's saying is that Canelo usually gets the advantage on the scorecards. And he does. I don't think that there's any denying that. But when it comes down to it, I'm leaning towards Canelo because, once again, I'm taking a look at this fight. There's almost nothing that Jermall Charlo beats Canelo in. Just nothing. He doesn't beat him in foot speed. He doesn't beat him in hand speed. He doesn't beat him in even in power. He doesn't beat him in anything besides height and reach. Nothing. Doesn't beat him in all-around skills. Nothing. At least that's the way that I see it. If I'm wrong, then I'll eat my crow. But that's just what I see.
I don't see Jermall knocking out Canelo. I don't see Canelo knocking out Jermall Charlo. I see a very good, very competitive fight.
I can see it going either way. I can see, this fight all in all ending similar to the Danny Jacobs fight at least, but it being a little bit more spread out. If Canelo is able to hit Jermall Charlo consistently, he very possibly could knock him out. Very possibly could knock him out.
Where Canelo Alvarez...
Because I don't know if Jermall Charlo has ever felt power in his career like what Canelo was going to throw at him. And Canelo is going to be able to hit him more consistently than what Jermall's past opponents were able to.
Is going to have to dig in to get the win. Same thing goes for Jermall Charlo. But all in all, I just really, really hope the fight happens. Anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think in the comment section. Leave your comment in the comment section. Like, share, and subscribe to share the video. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell icon so you can be notified when we release more videos. But with that, I'm out. Peace.
That's pretty much about it for the video today, but I just thought that I would review that because I thought it was very particularly interesting. But once again, just to give my little final analysis before my fight prediction, if the fight, of course, does even happen. But I just think that Canelo, all in all, I think that he at least wins by a decent decision. Because I think Canelo, I just think that he's too good for Jermall Charlo. Like I said, this would be like Floyd Mayweather and Miguel Cotto if they were fighting. I just think that Floyd is a little bit too skilled for someone like a Miguel Cotto. And Miguel Cotto was an all-time great fighter. But this is what this fight reminds me of. It just is what it is. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. And I'll talk to you all later.